Good morning. My name is Lingam. I'm a research-based artist out of Melbourne, Australia. My work is focused on visualizing glacial melt in the Khumbu in Nepal, and predominantly it focuses on the Ngozumpa Glacier. But the journey started a couple of years ago when I sort of started to work on it during my master's as I saw the glaciers melting, and then I was curious as to why in the Himalayas there's a lot of mountains, glaciers, but the glacial melt is not talked about as much compared to the West. I was lucky enough in 2023 to do a residency in Iceland, in Reykjavik, with Sin. And there I got to experience the glaciers in Iceland. And in Iceland, it's quite easy to access the glaciers. You drive up and you walk a bit and you are there. This particular work is based on an image I took at Solhamar in Iceland. It's about 2.5 hours outside Reykjavik. So the original image is a black and white, but I printed this in cyanotype. It's 24 panels, hand printed. And the reason I use the blue is because the glaciers in Iceland predominantly look blue, white and blue. And the darker colors on the image are actually the volcanic ash that's fallen on the ice over the years. So this work was done around 2023. And moving along, the information on this case is actually my field notes while I was at residency, trying to figure out how to come up with the right blue for the work. So it's a cyanotype process, and I was experimenting in Iceland in the residency, paper, different type of cyanotype, contrast colors, timing, and eventually I settled on a particular time having to print the cyanotypes. And this journey, as part of this journey, is part of a larger journey. I'm currently doing my PhD in practice-based research around visualizing glacial melt in the Khumbu. Again, I reiterate the focus of the Khumbu and the glaciers in the Himalayas is there's not much talked about it in the arts, and consider the number of glaciers and how it impacts 2 billion people downstream if these glaciers disappear. Last year, as part of the research, I trekked up to the Ngozumpa Glacier just outside Glacial. It was my first time to go to an altitude of 4,800 to look at a glacier. As I said, in Iceland, you drive, you do a short walk, the glaciers are visible. In contrast, in the Khumbu, not being super fit, it took me probably about 6 days with the trekking guide and porter to get to the Ngozumpa Glacier. And this work is an image of the Ngozumpa. It's an image taken from a lake's edge of the Ngozumpa Glacier. So it's a cross-section of the glacier. Very different to Iceland. This is debris covered. As you can see, I call it like a bread crust look, where the top part of it is full of rocks and sediments, and then the ice is still quite similar in terms of it's got the ice, and the black marks are sediments that have fallen over the years. And again, I have no idea. Some of this ice must be hundreds of years old. The challenge with the Ngozumpa glaciers is, what I understand reading papers, there's a lot of lakes forming. And the concern is if these lakes join each other, then they become a big glacial lake. And there's a lot of work being done by the folks here and some international researchers on these lakes. So I was there in June 6, 2024. I'm back in Kathmandu and plan to go back up to Glacial and the Ngozumpa Glacier by June 6 this year, to be at the same location and to see what is the difference, the changes within a year. That's going to be another interesting journey to actually experience the change 1 year on, how dramatically it's changed or it's not changed. Part of the process, what I've also done is I've made the fieldwork a critical part of the research because it's an experience about talking to people, being in the environment. And in that, the attached text is basically my field notes, which I've written up for one of my milestones. It goes through what I sensed. I'm trying to figure out. My research is essentially practice-based, making artwork, but I'm trying to blend scientific knowledge and traditional knowledge to storytell about glacial melt and the impacts of climate change and why this is important, something that needs to be addressed.
What inspired you to do the research in this field? The reason behind choosing Nepal?
That's a very interesting question. It's got a longer story. I was doing a project in Varanasi on the Ganges in India. It's a series of photographs called Bhakti, devotion. And I used to go there quite regularly, once a year for Mahashivaratri. And again, there's a bookstore there, and I talked to the owner, and Rakesh once said to me, as long as Ma Ganga is fine, the world is fine. And he said, when something happens, Ma Ganga recedes, it's the end of the world. That got me thinking, what is he referring to? Then, of course, being born a Hindu, I realized Ganga came from the heavens. If she recedes, there's no more fresh water, and that will be a problem for us. So looking into it, I realized that the Ganges River is fed by glaciers. That got me thinking, so I decided to focus on the glacier work. Then I picked Nepal and the Khumbu for a very simple reason. The Khumbu gets talked about when the Khumbu region and Everest gets talked about when someone is climbing, successfully climbed, or a disaster happens. And the focus of the Himalayas has always been about man, humans, conquering. But the glaciers are focused on from scientific research, but not much, as far as I could find, not much artwork is done storytelling about the glaciers and how they are important for survival for 2 billion people downstream. Because these glaciers store fresh water. And when there's no snow and the glaciers melt too fast, then there's issues with the drainage, how much water is available for farming, and things alike. So it becomes a critical, I believe it's a very important part of the South Asia environment, and not much has been talked about. From making it simple, a scientific paper has a lot of details, but I have problems understanding it. How about a person who's not interested? And how do I make this people to stop and consider? Just the act of showing work, they go, what is it? I explain or I share. Then they go, it's an aha moment. I think that makes a lot of difference. If I can get more people to stop and consider, I think the work speaks for itself.
Why do you think that the people should visit and see your works at the Taragaon Museum?
Very good question. Because I am fortunate. I've had the opportunity to spend 2 months in Iceland, be in front of a glacier, be present, photograph it, and make work about it. Very rarely would, number one, anyone consider going to Iceland. And number two, most people will not have the opportunity, I think. It's to share my experience, what I saw, because this particular work was shot. The photograph was made in May. 2 weeks later, I went back to the same location. It's gone. The ice has carved, melted away. So, there's a sense of urgency. Similarly, I'm not super fit, but, I put the effort to go to Nozumpa Glacier. I think a lot of people will not have the opportunity, or no, they'd be keen to go climbing, or walking for 6 days to go and see a glacier. I don't partly, again, I am only doing it because I want to tell the story. I would not go and visit every glacier in the world just for the purpose of just visiting. These as two distinct reasons: to tell the story of what's happening. If not, I wouldn't go. And I think it's important. And, having the exhibition in Taragaon, talking to the curator Roshan, and we came up with this idea. The interesting thing is the word samban about the exhibition is about relationship and connection in Nepali, and it's a Sanskrit-based word. Interestingly enough, in Icelandic language, samban means the same thing: relationship, connection. And when I was discussing with Roshan and a couple other people, I decided I would show two works, one from Iceland and one from the Nozumba glacier that I been to last year.